In the heart of New York City, 65-year-old Margaret lived a life of quiet loneliness. She had a husband, Richard, a wealthy businessman who spent most of his time buried in work. Their marriage had lost its warmth over the years, and with no children to keep her company, Margaret found herself trapped in an empty house, longing for connection. Her parents had passed away long ago, and she often sat by the window, watching the world move on without her. One evening, she noticed a moving truck pull up next door. A man in his late 50s, tall with graying hair and a kind face, stepped out. His name was James, a retired professor who had recently moved to the city, also alone, carrying the weight of his own solitude. Days passed, and one evening, there was a knock on Margaret's door. She opened it to find James standing there, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said with a gentle smile. "I just moved in, and I haven't had the chance to get groceries. I was wondering if I could borrow some sugar." Margaret, eager for company, invited him in and handed him what he needed. Their conversation started awkwardly but soon flowed easily. James was charming, intelligent, and warm in a way she hadn't felt in years. As weeks went by, James often knocked on her door, not just for sugar, but for coffee, for dinner, and sometimes just to talk. They laughed, shared stories, and discovered a connection neither of them expected. Margaret found herself looking forward to his visits, her heart fluttering in a way she thought was long forgotten. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, James looked at her with a tenderness that made her heart race. "Margaret, I've been alone for a long time. But when I'm with you, I feel alive again." Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes. "James, I feel the same way. But I'm still married." She knew her marriage with Richard had been over for years, but admitting it out loud was different. That night, as she lay in bed, she realized she had a choice: continue living in the shadows of a loveless marriage or embrace the happiness she had found with James. The next morning, she made a decision. She confronted Richard, telling him she wanted a divorce. He barely looked up from his laptop. "If that's what you want, do whatever makes you happy," he said indifferently. It was the final confirmation Margaret needed. She had been alone in this marriage for years. Months later, Margaret and James stood together in a small ceremony, exchanging vows. Their love story was unconventional, unexpected, and beautiful. They traveled, explored the city together, and filled each other's days with love and laughter. And that's where we'll take a quick break. Before we continue, if you haven't already, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our latest content. Also, let us know in the comments below what you think. Your feedback really helps us. Now, let's dive back in. Margaret had never thought she would find love again at 65, yet here she was, standing beside James as they began a new chapter of their lives. After her divorce was finalized, she sold the house that had once felt like a prison of loneliness and moved in with James. His apartment was smaller but filled with warmth, books stacked in cozy corners, and the scent of fresh coffee always lingering in the air. For the first time in decades, Margaret felt truly free. She and James spent their days rediscovering life, taking long walks in Central Park, exploring old bookstores, and trying different coffee shops across the city. James, a retired literature professor, introduced her to poetry, often reading to her in the evenings as they curled up on the couch together. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights, James took her hand. "You know, Margaret, I thought I would spend the rest of my days alone. But then you walked into my life, and everything changed." She squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with emotion. "I feel the same way. I never knew love could be this beautiful, this effortless." Their days were filled with joy, but not everything was perfect. Margaret struggled with the guilt of leaving her past behind. Richard had never loved her the way James did, but decades of marriage were not easy to forget. She wondered if she had made the right choice, if she had been too selfish in choosing her own happiness. One afternoon, as she sipped tea by the window, lost in thought, James sat beside her. "You're thinking about him again, aren't you?" he asked softly. Margaret nodded. I spent so many years with Richard. I know he didn't love me the way I needed, but still, I feel like I abandoned everything I once stood for." James turned to her, his eyes filled with understanding. "Margaret, love isn't about endurance. It's about happiness, about companionship. You gave him years of your life, but he never gave you his time, his affection. You didn't walk away from a marriage. You walked toward a life where you are truly loved. His words comforted her more than she could express. She leaned into his arms, breathing in the warmth of the man who had given her a second chance at love. A new adventure. As months passed, Margaret and James decided they didn't want to just stay in New York forever. James had always wanted to visit Europe, and Margaret, for the first time in her life, felt a thirst for adventure. "Let's go to Italy," James suggested one evening as they flipped through an old travel magazine. "Italy." Margaret's eyes widened with excitement. "I've never been." "Then it's settled," he grinned. "Rome, Florence, Venice. Just you and me, making memories." They packed their bags, booked their tickets, and within weeks, they were strolling through the cobbled streets of Rome, hand in hand. They marveled at the beauty of the Colosseum, threw coins into the Trevi Fountain, and dined in tiny cafes where the scent of fresh pasta filled the air. One night in Venice, as they rode a gondola through the quiet canals, James turned to her. "Margaret, do you ever regret choosing this life with me?" She looked into his eyes, her heart overflowing with love. "Never. Not even for a second." As their gondola drifted under a small bridge, James leaned in and kissed her. A kiss filled with the passion of newfound love and the depth of two souls who had found each other against all odds. Returning home. After months of traveling, they returned to New York, their hearts full of memories. But life had another surprise in store. One evening, as they walked past an animal shelter, Margaret noticed a small golden retriever puppy staring at her through the glass. "James," she whispered. "Look at him." James chuckled. "You want to adopt a dog?" She nodded, eyes twinkling with excitement. "I never had children. I think I want to take care of someone, to love and be loved in return." And so, they brought the little puppy home, naming him Lucky. Their apartment was now filled with playful barks and laughter, making their love story even more complete. A love that never fades. Years passed, and though time left its mark on them, their love only grew stronger. They spent mornings reading together, afternoons taking Lucky for walks, and evenings reminiscing about their travels. Margaret, once a lonely woman trapped in a loveless marriage, had now found the love of her life in the most unexpected way. James, once resigned to solitude, had found a companion who made every day worth waking up for. As they sat on their balcony one evening, watching the sunset over the city, James took Margaret's hand. "I love you, Margaret," he whispered. She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "And I love you, James. More than I ever thought possible." Years passed, and Margaret and James lived a life filled with love, adventure, and companionship. Their days were no longer lonely, nor did Margaret feel the emptiness she once had in her large, quiet house. Instead, their apartment, though small, was filled with warmth. The sound of Lucky's playful barking echoed through the halls, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, and the sight of James reading poetry aloud to Margaret became an everyday ritual. Margaret had never imagined that at 65, she would find a love so pure, so effortless. She had spent most of her life believing that love was about endurance, about staying in a marriage that had long lost its meaning. But James had shown her otherwise. Love, she now realized, was about companionship, laughter, and shared moments that made life beautiful. One winter evening, as the snow fell outside, Margaret and James sat by the fireplace. She rested her head on his shoulder while he read to her from one of his favorite books. The words, soft and poetic, melted into the warmth of the room. "James," she whispered, her voice laced with nostalgia. "Do you ever think about the past?" He closed the book and looked at her. "I do. But more than that, I think about how lucky I am that our paths crossed when they did." She smiled. "Me too. I used to think my life was over, that love was something that only existed for the young. But you proved me wrong." James held her hand, his touch gentle yet firm. "Love doesn't have an age, Margaret. It finds us when we least expect it." They sat in silence for a while, watching the snowflakes dance outside the window, feeling content in the presence of one another. A change in fate. As much as their love flourished, time did not stand still. Margaret turned 70, and James, now in his early 60s, started feeling the weight of age catching up to him. Though they still traveled occasionally and enjoyed their walks in Central Park, James's health began to show signs of decline. One morning, as he prepared breakfast, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. Margaret, sensing something was wrong, rushed to his side. "James, are you all right?" He gripped the edge of the counter, his face pale. I don't feel too well." Panic set in as Margaret immediately called for an ambulance. She held his hand tightly as they rushed him to the hospital, fear gripping her heart. She had found love so late in life. Was fate now trying to take it away from her? James was diagnosed with a heart condition, something he had ignored for years. The doctor advised him to take things slow, to rest more, but James wasn't one to let sickness dictate his life. "Margaret," he said as he lay in the hospital bed, looking into her worried eyes. "Don't be scared. I'm not going anywhere just yet." But Margaret couldn't help but worry. Every moment with him now felt precious, every shared laugh, every touch more meaningful than before. A final journey together. Knowing that their time together was uncertain, James and Margaret made a decision to go on one final trip together. Italy had been magical, but this time, they chose a quieter place. They traveled to a small countryside town in France, where they stayed in a cozy cottage surrounded by lavender fields. Each morning, they sat on the porch, sipping tea as the sun bathed the fields in golden light. Margaret captured every moment in her heart, memorizing the way James smiled, the way his eyes twinkled when he spoke about his love for books and travel. One evening, as they walked through the fields, James suddenly stopped and turned to her. "Margaret," he said softly, "promise me something." She looked at him, her heart heavy. "Anything, James. If something happens to me, don't stop living. Keep traveling. Keep loving life. And most importantly, don't let loneliness find you again." Tears welled in her eyes. "Don't talk like that." He smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "It's not sadness, my love. It's reality. But I want you to promise me." With a heavy heart, she nodded. "I promise." They spent their last days in France simply loving each other, cherishing every sunrise and every whisper of the wind. The inevitable goodbye. When they returned to New York, James's health worsened. One night, as they lay in bed, he held her hand tightly. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice weak. She turned to him, fear gripping her chest. "I'm here, my love." He looked at her with deep affection. "Thank you for giving me the happiest years of my life." Tears streamed down her face. "And you gave me mine." With one last loving smile, James closed his eyes. His grip on her hand loosened, and just like that, he was gone. Margaret's world shattered. The man who had brought light into her lonely life, who had shown her what love truly meant, was no longer beside her. For weeks, she struggled with the emptiness. Lucky, sensing her pain, never left her side. But then, she remembered her promise to James. She packed her bags and set out on a journey, not to escape her grief, but to honor his memory. She visited the places they had dreamed of, carried his love with her in every step she took. Years later, as she sat in a small cafe in Venice, she found herself smiling. She felt James's presence in the warm breeze, in the laughter of the people around her. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I kept my promise, James." And with that, she continued her journey, carrying his love in her heart until the end of her days. The end. Thank you so much for watching our heartwarming love story. We hope their journey of love, healing, and redemption touched your heart as much as it did ours. If you enjoyed this video, even just a little bit, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. We know you enjoy watching our videos, but if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you more amazing content like this. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we upload new videos filled with love, inspiration, and beautiful stories. Plus, you'll be joining a wonderful community of people who appreciate heartwarming tales just like you. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your feedback on this story. Did it make you smile? Did it remind you of someone special? Let us know. Your comments truly make our day and inspire us to create even more captivating content for you.